For decades now, millions of Americans have gone to the polls knowing, deep down, that their vote won't make a difference. Not because they're apathetic, not because they didn't show up, but because the system is rigged long before Election Day ever arrives. District lines are drawn in back rooms, behind closed doors, by politicians choosing their voters instead of the other way around. This isn't a fringe conspiracy theory. It's gerrymandering, one of the most enduring tools of political manipulation in American history. And it's not new. Both parties have used it when they've had the chance. But in recent decades, it's evolved into something far more precise, far more deliberate, and far more dangerous. Powered by advanced software, granular demographic modeling, and years of voter data, today's gerrymanders can predict electoral outcomes with chilling accuracy. They can split neighborhoods, dilute communities, and neutralize the voices of millions while preserving the illusion of choice. Let's look at Texas. In statewide elections, voters are nearly split down the middle. But thanks to how the maps are drawn, one party consistently wins a supermajority of seats. That's not democracy. That's design. And it's not just Texas. From Wisconsin to North Carolina to Ohio, the story is the same. Maps engineered to entrench power, suppress competition, and insulate incumbents from accountability. What we're left with is a system that holds elections without true contest, where the outcomes are largely predetermined, where entire segments of the electorate are locked out of the influence permanently. This is the heart of the crisis, not low turnout, not voter apathy, but a system where millions show up only to discover their voice has already been erased from the conversation. The map decides the outcome. And until we change the map, we can't claim to have a government that truly represents us. At the heart of America's broken electoral system lies a deceptively simple idea. Every district sends just one person to Congress. One district, one winner, one seat. It's called a single-member district, and it might sound intuitive, almost natural. But this structure, combined with winner-take-all voting, is the quiet engine behind gerrymandering, polarization, and the erosion of real political representation in the United States. Here's how it works. In almost every congressional district, the candidate with the most votes wins. Not a majority, just more votes than anyone else. Even if that's 38% in a crowded field. Even if 62% of the voters choose someone else. This creates a brutal kind of zero-sum politics. There's no reward for second place, no room for nuance, no incentive to build a consensus. So what do parties do? They work the map. They carve up cities and counties like puzzle pieces. They pack their opponents' voters into a few districts, then spread their own supporters thin but wide, just enough to win more seats, even with fewer total votes. It's not hypothetical. In 2012, Democrats won over 1.4 million more votes nationwide for House races. But Republicans held the majority. Why? Because they had drawn the districts. And it works the other way too, whenever Democrats control the pen. This isn't about one party's villainy. It's about a system that invites it. Single-member districts reward manipulation. They punish third parties and independents. They amplify small advantages into lopsided results. And worst of all, they erase millions of voices. If you're a Republican in a deep blue district or a Democrat in a red stronghold, your vote doesn't count for much. Your views won't shape the outcome. You're just a number in someone else's column. This leads to what political scientists call wasted votes. In fact, most votes in American House elections today are wasted, either cast for a losing candidate or piled into a winner who didn't need them. That's not a healthy democracy. That's performance theater, and it has real consequences. With so many safe districts, most members of Congress only worry about one thing: their next primary. So the incentive shifts. Instead of reaching out to the middle, politicians double down on their base. They play to the loudest voices, the most extreme factions, the angriest echo chambers, because those are the only votes who can threaten their job. This is how extremism flourishes, not because the American people are radical, but because the system filters out moderation. All of it, the gerrymandering, the gridlock, the manufactured outrage, it flows from this core design flaw. Single-member districts don't just distort outcomes, they distort incentives. They shape who runs, how they campaign, and who gets left behind. We've built a system where geography defines democracy, where your zip code determines whether your voice is heard or discarded. And until we confront this structural failure, all the reforms in the world will be treating symptoms, but not the cause. The disease is the district itself. But there is another way. A system that puts power back in the hands of voters, no matter where they live, what party they support, or what lines are drawn on a map. It's called multi-member districts with proportional representation. And this isn't some radical, untested idea. In fact, it's the norm in most established democracies around the world. And right here in the U.S., versions of it are already used in places like Cambridge, Massachusetts, and in some city council and school boards. Here's how it works. Instead of slicing up the state into dozens of tiny districts, each electing just one person, you group those into larger regional districts. For example, rather than dividing Texas into 38 separate congressional seats, you could create 7 or 8 broader districts, each electing between 4 and 6 members. Then you introduce ranked choice voting, which Alaska currently uses and the Libertarians have been pushing for decades. Voters don't just pick one candidate, they rank them: first choice, second choice, third, and so on. The vote count is designed to reflect the will of the people, not just the majority. Seats are allocated proportionally based on how much support each party or candidate bloc receives. If 40% of the voters in a region support Democrats, and 40% support Republicans, and 20% support independents or Greens or Libertarians, then roughly 40, 40, and 20% of the seats would reflect that. That means you don't need to live in the right part of the map to have a voice. Minority parties can win seats without needing to game the system. Voters have real, meaningful choices, not just between two extremes. And representation actually mirrors the political diversity of the population. It makes elections fairer. It makes Congress more responsive. And perhaps most importantly, it makes your vote matter. No more safe districts. No more foregone conclusions. No more silenced voices. Just a Congress that looks and sounds a little more like the country it's supposed to represent. Let's take Texas as a case study. Because if there's any state that shows just how broken our system has become, it's Texas. Today, Texas has 38 congressional districts. And if you've ever looked at the map, you know it's not pretty. It's a jigsaw puzzle of bizarre shapes, drawn less to reflect communities and more to engineer political outcomes. In Houston, voters from the same neighborhood might split across 3 or 4 districts, each tethered to rural areas hundreds of miles away. In Austin, a city with over 1 million people and a strong Democratic base, residents are divided into multiple districts, designed to dilute their influence. That's not representation. That's manipulation. But now imagine a different map, one that reflects how Texans actually live, work, and vote. Instead of 38 separate districts, the state is divided into 6 or 7 large regional areas. Each region would elect multiple representatives, let's say 6 or 7 per district, depending on the population. You could divide it up like this. North Texas, centered on Dallas and Fort Worth and its surrounding suburbs. Greater Houston, covering the entire metro area and its economic orbit. The Austin to San Antonio corridor, the fast-growing central corridor of Texas. South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, a culturally unique bilingual region with deep historical roots. West Texas and the Panhandle, a vast rural expanse with its own priorities. And East Texas, with smaller towns, forested communities, and border-adjacent counties. If you needed a seventh region to balance population, perhaps parts of central and coastal Texas. Each regional district would hold one election, but multiple seats would be up for grabs. And rather than a winner-take-all outcome where 51% of the voters get 100% of the power, seats would be awarded proportionally. So if Greater Houston votes roughly 55% Republican and 45% Democrat, then in a 6-member district you might end up with 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats and 1 swing seat that could go either way, or say to the Libertarians. In Austin, San Antonio, which leans more Democratic, the breakdown might be 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Even in deep red areas like the Panhandle, the system would allow moderate or independent conservatives, who often differ from party hardliners, to compete and win. And in South Texas, where Latino voters are increasingly politically diverse, voters wouldn't be forced into a binary red-blue choice. This isn't just a map change. It's a paradigm shift. Voters in every region would have the power to elect someone who actually reflects their views. No party could dominate a region unless it truly had overwhelming support. And the incentive to gerrymander? Gone. There's no way to slice up and concentrate a district that already includes everyone. Multi-member districts don't just offer more voices at the table. They weaken the tools of manipulation that have rigged the game for decades. In a state as diverse and deeply divided as Texas, this approach wouldn't just be more fair. It would be more honest, because it would finally allow Texas to speak with the full complexity of its voice. So, what would it take for this to happen? Surprisingly little, and yet quite a lot. The main obstacle isn't the Constitution. It's a federal statute passed in 1967, a simple law that requires all states to elect their House representatives using single-member districts. That law was meant to eliminate statewide winner-take-all elections, which were also unfair. But it locked us into a different kind of unfairness. A system where each district gets just one winner, no matter how narrow or distorted the majority. To switch to multi-member districts with proportional representation, Congress would simply need to repeal or amend that law. That's exactly what the Fair Representation Act proposes. It's already been introduced in Congress. The bill would not only lift the single-member requirement, it would encourage states to adopt proportional systems using ranked choice voting, giving them tools to make elections more fair, more competitive, and more representative. But let's be honest, even passing that bill would be a heavy lift, because the very people who benefit from the current system, the ones elected through distorted maps and uncompetitive districts, are the ones who have to vote to change it. That's why public pressure is critical. Voters have to demand a system that values all our voices, not just those in hand-picked majorities. And grassroots movements, civic groups, and reform coalitions are already organizing to do just that, in red states, in blue states, and everywhere in between. Still, the best and most durable path forward may even be bigger. A constitutional amendment that guarantees all Americans the right to proportional representation. That would mean no future Congress or federal court could undo it. It would make fair representation a fundamental right, not just a policy preference. A cornerstone of democracy, like free speech or equal protection. And it would finally bring the United States in line with most other modern democracies, where elections don't distort the will of the people, but reflect it. This isn't about helping one party over another. It's about strengthening the foundation of the entire system. Because without fair representation, we don't have a functioning democracy. We have a facade of one. And that's not good enough. Not for a country that still claims to believe in government by the people. One of the most powerful features of multi-member districts is how they open the door to more voices, not just the louder ones. In today's winner-take-all system, millions of Americans vote for third parties like the Greens or the Libertarians. And year after year, they walk away with nothing to show for it. Not because their views lack support, but because the system is built to exclude them. In a single-member district, a candidate can win with just 38% of the vote if the other 62% is split among multiple opponents. That leaves the majority without a representative who shares their values, and smaller parties perpetually locked out. But in a multi-member district with proportional voting, that changes. You don't need to come in first. You just need to meet the fair threshold, say 15% in a 5-seat district, to earn a seat at the table. That means Libertarians, Greens, Independents, and others don't need to win everywhere to win something. And it means voters finally have a real reason to vote their conscience without being told they're throwing away their vote. It doesn't just make our politics more inclusive. It makes it more honest. Because if 15% of the public supports a party, why shouldn't they have 15% of the voice? That's the promise of proportional representation. It doesn't rig the system for one party or another. It makes room for every voice without forcing them into a binary box. We're at a crossroads. Each election, more Americans feel disconnected from the process. Voter turnout lags. Trust in institutions erodes. People stop believing their voice matters, and in many cases, they're right. But under the system we have now, millions of votes are routinely wasted. Entire communities are effectively written off. And the balance of power is often determined not by voters, but whoever draws the lines. But that's not a failure of democracy itself. It's a failure of design. We've built a system that allows manipulation to thrive, a system where political outcomes can be engineered long before anyone casts a ballot. And the structure of our elections no longer reflects the diversity of the people who live here. That's not inevitable. It's not untouchable. It's a choice, and it's one we can undo. We don't need to invent some untested theory. We don't need to start from scratch. The solutions are already in use. Around the world and even in parts of the U.S., multi-member districts and proportional representation have shown they can deliver what single-member winner-take-all systems often can't: fairness, inclusion, and actual responsiveness. This isn't about making every party win. It's about making every vote matter. When we match representation to reality, we strengthen the bond between government and the governed. We make it harder to ignore the will of the people, harder to entrench minority rule, and harder to divide a country into artificial red and blue maps that don't reflect the richness of our political lives. This is about honesty, about aligning our democratic values with the systems we use to uphold them. Multi-member districts, proportional voting, honest maps, fair outcome. Let's stop settling for a system that distorts our voices. Let's build a democracy that listens to them. Because a democracy where every vote counts isn't just fairer, it's stronger. And it's time.